The morning of Tuesday, May 12th, 2026, dawned over Weatherfield with a sky the color of a bruised plum, the heavy clouds threatening a downpour that mirrored the somber mood of the residents. On the cobbles, the usual morning bustle was replaced by a tense, watchful silence as the community grappled with the fallout of Todd Grimshaw's devastating confession from the night before. At the precinct, the atmosphere was electric with the arrival of a high-ranking official from the major incident team, signaling that the Weatherfield Web had officially moved beyond the jurisdiction of local policing. DS Lisa Swain stood in the briefing room, her eyes fixed on the updated evidence board, which now featured a tangled web of red string connecting Todd, Gary Windass, and the still mysterious second passenger, mentioned in Megan Walsh's exit strategy. Beside her, DC Kit Green looked remarkably energized despite having had only 3 hours of sleep. He was obsessed with the chemical traces found in the blue sedan, convinced that the specific industrial solvent used to scrub the interior was the key to identifying the hidden warehouse where Theo Silverton's body had likely been stored before its final discovery. Over at the garage, Kevin Webster was attempting to work on a rusted exhaust pipe, but his hands were shaking so violently that he eventually dropped the wrench with a clatter that echoed through the workshop. Tyrone Dobbs watched him from the shadows, sensing that his friend was on the verge of a total collapse. The news that Gary had been the cleaner for Megan had shattered Kevin's belief in the local code of loyalty. He spoke in a low, gravelly voice about the times Gary had sat at his kitchen table, playing with Jack and talking about the future of the construction business, all while he was arguably complicit in the most heinous crime the street had seen in years. Tyrone tried to offer a defense, suggesting that Gary was likely being blackmailed, but Kevin wasn't interested in excuses. To him, the street was a place where you looked out for your own, and Gary had traded that protection for a pocketful of dirty money. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a local journalist, whom Kevin promptly and aggressively chased off the premises, his frustration finally finding a physical outlet. At the Rover's return, the 2030 special broadcast began with Maggie facing the daunting task of reopening the pub for the first time since Will's charging. She moved with the grace of a sleepwalker, setting out the glasses and checking the inventory as if by rote. The pub remained empty for the first hour, a chilling testament to the stigma that now attached itself to anyone linked to the case. When the door finally opened, it was Audrey Roberts who walked in, her regal composure a stark contrast to the chaos outside. She sat at the bar and ordered a small sherry, her presence a silent act of defiance against the gossip mongers. Audrey and Maggie spoke in hushed tones about the exit strategy documents, with Audrey expressing a chilling suspicion that the second passenger wasn't a criminal at all, but another victim whom Megan intended to use as a human shield during her escape. This theory added a new layer of urgency to the police hunt, shifting the focus from an arrest to a rescue mission. In the back office of the factory, Carla Connor was conducting an emergency audit of the payroll. The investigation into the Jodie Ramsey fund had revealed that several of her employees had been funneling small portions of their wages into what they thought was a charitable trust for a missing girl. Carla felt a deep sense of responsibility for the financial ruin her staff were now facing. She was joined by Peter, who was struggling to stay grounded as the familiar scent of scandal and tragedy threatened his own hard-won sobriety. They discussed the possibility of the factory taking on the debt to save the workers' homes, a move that would put Underworld at significant financial risk. It was a moment of moral clarity for Carla. She realized that the street couldn't survive if the heart of its economy was ripped out by Megan Walsh's greed. Their discussion was cut short by a phone call from the police. Kit Green had found a link between the industrial solvent and a defunct textile supplier that Carla had done business with years ago, a supplier whose old warehouse was located just a few miles away in an industrial park known as the Ginnel's End. The narrative intensity surged as the scene shifted back to the precinct, where Kit Green was presenting his breakthrough to Swain. By tracing the batch numbers of the solvent, he had located the exact purchase order made by a shell company owned by Megan Walsh. The warehouse at the Ginnel's End wasn't just a storage facility, it was the hub of the entire operation. Kit's theory was that Jodie Ramsey was being held there, not as a captive, but as a willing participant who was now being cleaned up herself. The realization that they were dealing with two masterminds instead of one changed the entire dynamic of the raid. Swain ordered the tactical teams to mobilize immediately, her voice sharp with the weight of the coming confrontation. As the sirens began to wail in the distance, the residents of Coronation Street watched from their windows, the blue and red lights flashing against the brickwork like a warning of the final, violent climax that was about to unfold at the edge of town. This first chapter of the Tuesday episode concluded with a shot of the blue sedan being loaded onto a police trailer, its sleek, dark surface reflecting the grim determination of a community that was finally ready to see the truth, no matter how much it hurt. The second chapter of this Tuesday night drama unfolded under the flickering orange glow of the industrial park's perimeter lights, a desolate landscape of corrugated iron and broken glass that felt worlds away from the cozy domesticity of the cobbles. As the tactical units moved into position around the warehouse at the Ginnel's end, the silence was absolute, broken only by the distant, rhythmic hum of the motorway. DS Lisa Swain and DC Kit Green stood behind the lead armored vehicle, their breath misting in the cold night air. Kit's hand rested on the hilt of his radio, his eyes fixed on a single-lit window on the upper floor. This was the moment of maximum peril. If his theory was correct, the second passenger wasn't just a partner in crime, but the final loose end Megan Walsh needed to snip. Inside the warehouse, the air was thick with the sharp, chemical tang of the solvent Kit had been tracking. In a small, makeshift office, Megan was frantically feeding documents into a portable shredder, her movements jagged and desperate. Sitting across from her, seemingly unbothered by the impending raid, was the figure who had haunted the street's conscience for months, Jodie Ramsey. The confrontation inside the warehouse began not with a bang, but with a chillingly calm conversation. As the police breached the lower levels, the sound of crashing doors echoing through the hollow structure, Jodie looked at Megan and smiled, a slow, predatory expression that revealed the true power dynamic of their partnership. Jodie wasn't the apprentice Megan had claimed she was. She was the one who had provided the technical infrastructure for the entire fraud. When Swain and Kit finally burst into the office, they found Megan with her hands raised, but Jodie remained seated, a laptop balanced on her knees. She looked at Kit with a terrifying lack of remorse, informing him that even if they arrested her, the Jodie Ramsey Fund was already being dispersed into a series of untraceable cryptocurrency wallets. It was a digital scorched earth policy, a final act of spite against the community that had tried to save her. Back on the street, the 2030 hour reached its emotional peak as the news of the raid filtered back to the Rovers. Maggie had turned the radio up, the live news report providing a play-by-play of the unfolding drama at the industrial park. When the reporter confirmed that 2 women had been taken into custody, a collective sigh of relief swept through the pub, but it was short-lived. David Platt stood in the center of the room, his phone buzzing with a message from Shona. The police had found a second hidden compartment in the warehouse, one containing the personal effects of several other missing teenagers from across the Northwest. The horror of the realization that Jodie and Megan were part of a much larger, more predatory network turned the victory into a moment of profound mourning. David felt a wave of nausea as he realized just how close he had brought a serial predator to his own children. At the police station, the late-night processing of the suspects was a study in contrasts. Megan Walsh was a broken woman, her legal defense crumbling as she realized Jodie had been recording their conversations for months as insurance. She began to talk, her confession a desperate attempt to shift the blame, describing how Jodie had orchestrated the murder of Theo Silverton when he threatened to go to the police about the textile fraud. In the next room, Jodie Ramsey sat in total silence, refusing to acknowledge the presence of the lawyers or the detectives. She didn't need to speak. The data Kit was recovering from her laptop was a silent, damning testimony to a level of calculated cruelty that left even the seasoned DS Swain shaken. The episode drew toward its conclusion with a series of quiet, devastating vignettes. Kevin and Tyrone were seen closing the garage doors, the blue sedan now a permanent memory of a betrayal they would never truly get past. In the factory, Carla and Peter sat in the dark office, the weight of the coming financial struggle evident in the weary slump of Carla's shoulders. They were safe from the physical threat, but the economic scars would take years to heal. The final shot of the night was of the Ginnel behind Coronation Street. The rain had started again, washing away the chalk marks and the police tape, leaving the cobbles clean but changed. As the camera panned up to the moon, partially obscured by the dark clouds, the credits rolled over the sound of a single, distant siren, a reminder that while the Weatherfield Web had been torn down, the ghosts of the deception would haunt the street for a long time to come. This Tuesday episode, a masterclass in tension and revelation, ended with a sense of grim closure, leaving the audience to wonder how a community built on trust could ever truly recover from a predator who looked like a daughter.